Before the review, reminder that Yume Nikki likes tend to feature graphic or uncomfortable content. Be careful while watching Distance. Hi, welcome back to Distance. This is my video review of the Yume Nikki Fangame Quilt, made by these four awesome people. Quilt is a very untraditional fan game with many things that set apart from the original Yume Nikki. Quilt is one of my favorite fan games in my current collection. It does a lot of things right and handles dreaminess in a surprisingly unique way. While the game has its flaws, those flaws are often dwarfed by the things I love about it, and I hope that this video serves as a way for me to communicate my love for the Yume Nikki fan game Quilt. Let me set the scene. The game opens with a simple RPG Maker title screen, and I gotta say, right off the batter from off, this game's first impression is a strong one. This title screen artwork is awesome. It vaguely resembles a tree, but with the most fucked up color palettes possible. The menu music is also kind of interesting. It's a lot more dynamic than other fangame title screen tracks. It feels both digital and natural at the same time, pairing well with the artwork being shown. The title screen menu options have also been changed, which isn't exactly uncommon for Yume Nikki fan games. For example, in .flow, the main menu's new game option is changed to say .flow. In Quilt though, all options are changed in a way that makes it feel almost childish, which will be a common theme throughout the entire game. I hope you're ready for me to say that a lot. Starting the game, you'll be shown some very basic instructions, probably the simplest I've ever seen out of all the fan games I've played, and then here we are. Not much to this whole introduction, it's pretty standard. Before I get to the game itself, I of course have to talk about the protagonists and their living conditions. Every Yume Nikki fan game has one, and this one features... Oof, only 2 minutes in and we're already deviating. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, this game's protagonist doesn't actually have a name. There's no name shown in the save menu, and the Yume Nikki fan game's wiki just lists them as protagonist. Very creative, I like it. This is a very interesting decision by the devs. To have the most important character go nameless is not only baffling, it's also really cool. The fact that I can't point to a name to describe this character means I have no choice but to refer to them objectively, either by calling them the Quilt protagonist, or referencing them descriptively, like the sleepy looking baby. It's so awkward, but I love that awkwardness. It's the kind of meta I haven't seen before, and that is really cool. Why do I have a feeling this review is going to be full of detours? A little baby looking fella wearing the sleepy time hat. I really like the way this character looks. The weird teal color in the hair does it for me. I like the way they're animated, plus they can sit in all four directions, which is always nice. The fact that the hair covers the eyes is nice, although for some reason I do seem to keep misreading these 3 dark pixels as eyes, even though they clearly aren't. I find this character very simple, but still very memorable, though that might just be because it's one of the first baby looking fellas I've ever seen, so there's some potential bias there. Nitro Rat in his recent Yume Nikki video has described people describing Madatsuki as age ambiguous, but I can at least say that her, along with many other fangame protagonists, are at least old enough to understand what a multiplication symbol is. I don't get that vibe with this guy. They look like they barely know how to hold an apple properly. And now I will talk about the protagonist's room. Usually rooms are practical and not always about style, but this is art, which means that there's likely artistic motivation behind the way the room looks. And I mean, look at it. It's one of the coolest rooms in any Yume Nikki fan game I've ever seen. To me, it radiates the title of the game. It feels really cozy and also really textured, which will be something I talk about more later. There's no balcony, which is sort of odd, but I think it makes sense when you consider this feels a lot less like an apartment and more like a bedroom in a house. I mean, my bedroom doesn't have a balcony, so why should this guy get one? This is the part of the script reserved for minigames. There isn't one. Moving on, there's a book in the bottom right that just repeats the game's instructions at you. This is somewhat strange, but I find it a welcome change from the usual just stick the instructions in the effects menu somewhere, it's fine approach that a lot of fan games have, which I find more annoying than anything. Seriously, Fog, why? As is the case with most fan games, you interact with the desk to save and interact with the bed to go to sleep. Pretty standard stuff there. What? Wait, what? Wait, what? Yeah, this game doesn't have a nexus. Instead, interacting with the bed in Quilt takes you to one of 5 worlds in a predefined order, except for the first time on a new save, in which case it's random. This is one of my favorite deviations from standard practice, and I hope that more worlds are added to this pool in the future. There needs to be at least 10, I think. It completely changes how exploring this game's dream world works. It disincentivizes the player from trying to take any specific route through the dream world, since trying to do so has almost become a hassle. I also like that it's more accurate to dreams, or at least my dreams. When I go to sleep in my life and enter my dream world, I don't really end up in a nexus with 12 doors that take me to dream worlds I can become familiar with. I usually just kind of end up somewhere, and maybe I'll go places. Small correction, sometimes I do end up in doors to nowhere, but most of the time I do have to walk there myself. Granted, this implies the most accurate Yume Nikki Fangame is one in which there's no continuity whatsoever between worlds, aka LSD Dream Emulator, but to my knowledge this hasn't been done in a Yume Nikki Fangame yet. For some fangames, this kind of system would absolutely not work. Like if Yume Graffiti tried to do something similar, I'd get pretty frustrated pretty quickly, but because Quilt's Dream World was made with this concept in mind, it just fucking works. This game has a very wild first impression. I think it sets up expectations well. You're presented with the kind of art you'll be seeing and hearing in this game's dream world pretty much the moment you start the game. Though I will say, there's not much concrete lore to be found here, aside from the fact that the protagonist is either a child or just very childlike. There's not even a door to say no to. Oh well. As I expected, this Yume Nikki Fangame has gameplay. Whether or not this surprises you is your choice to decide. Quilt's gameplay is incredibly smooth. Everything kinda just works exactly as you would expect it to. There's almost no weird collision, and most of the time it actually works intuitively, at least for me. For some reason though, there's a very, very glaring exception to this, and that's the collision found in the monochrome playground area that for some reason just has a lot of invisible walls everywhere. I have a feeling these invisible boxes are caused by these towers, which I think might be made with event tiles. To which I say, clever, but why? Seems like a very obtuse way of doing it. In fact, on that note, there's actually a surprising amount of things in this game seemingly made with event tiles. Like, you can casually walk through these planes in this area. Why is this possible? I don't consider stuff like this a problem. Leniency is always appreciated. It just seems very peculiar that the game is designed this way. Quilt has some really weird environmental connections that end up allowing for some very unintuitive routes through the dream world. A good example shown in my Around the World video is this connection between the dark stone area and the hedge maze. Most of the time it functions normally, it's just connecting the two spaces. However, when entering the dark area from the hedge maze, there's a small chance it takes you to a slightly different version of the dark area. This variant of the dark room is pretty much exactly the same, just with all the rocks and things spazzing out or something. Unless you have the bed there, you have no choice but to go back, but instead of taking you back to the hedge maze, it actually takes you to the furniture room, which is already weird, but to take this even further, going back down to the dark area will take you back to the regular one, resulting in this weird square of connections, where one of those connections is really rare for no reason. There's another connection in the game like this, but I'll just show it on screen to avoid talking about it. What's interesting is that these two weird connections are actually huge outliers. The rest of the connections in the game are actually pretty vanilla. There's the usual shit like doors or NPCs that take you somewhere random, but then there are these two connections that just change seemingly out of nowhere, and funny enough, they both actually lead to the same place. Quilt's Dream World is also really tiny. I think it might actually be the smallest fan game I have in my collection at the moment, except for maybe Answer Prayers version 0.01, or I'm not pronouncing that, which is literally just a demo. This isn't a problem, this game came out very recent. Never mind! So it's kind of expected to be that small, but that does mean that it is unavoidably hard to replay, since you can find basically everything in a single play session at the moment. That being said, this game is actually small enough that it has incentivized me to make a map of it in Obsidian, which is also what led me to create that Around the World video. So, there's something, I guess. Moving on to the effects. Effects are the usual collectible thing that fan games are expected to have. You can get effects by interacting with thing or picking up thing. Effects can be equipped from the menu. Nope. This game doesn't have a menu, so standard effects are out of the question. Instead of traditional effects, this game has items, which serve a similar purpose to effects. They still change the character's appearance, but the way you collect them is quite different. You can only carry 2 at a time. When you interact with thing and get an item, you kinda just hold on to it. Pressing shift swaps between the 2 items you're carrying, and you can do this while walking around if you want. My favorite part about this system though, and is the reason why this is my favorite deviation in this game, you can press X to drop your items anywhere in the game. Outside of like one place, because it's, well, I think trying to code items to work here would be one of the worst fates imaginable. And yes, the position of every item saves through wake-ups, meaning that the item will stay there until you pick it up again. I don't think I can exactly get it across just how much I love this system. There's just something about being able to drop an item off and fuck knows where, and then knowing it'll just stay there. And I can forget about it, and then stumble onto it like an hour later. Words. Not every fan game would benefit from such a system, but it definitely benefits Quilt. Again, probably because the game is built with this system in mind. I wouldn't say it really keeps the game fresh. The game is too small for it to really have that kind of effect, but it definitely is something. And I love that something. The only thing that would make this system even better and more interesting is if there were like maybe buttons on the ground you could put items on to open doors across the dream world or something. Some way for the items to interact with the world would be really awesome, because as it stands, the items are almost purely cosmetic. I really wish they did something. Effects in Quilt are referred to as items. From what I can tell, there are 16 of them in total. The item lineup in this game is somewhat varied, ranging from a frog turning your head into a frog head to an apple turning you into a worm. A lot of very childish stuff. There's also wearable pieces of clothing like a shower hat or a bucket, which, I mean, come on, that's basically like a child's dream. But wait, right, yeah. Alongside these surprisingly normal things are the really weird items, like a walking nose that turns you into the nose, or this guy who gives you a really big head, which is kind of terrifying. I don't like this one. These items can get really weird and surreal, but nothing actually gets too dangerous, I guess. There's no weapons or anything implying some kind of self-hatred or falling apart. I'll describe all the items as being very safe, definitely childish, but also a little bit uninteresting. I'm not really drawn to any of the items at all, like I am with, say, the Wendigo effect from Insomnia. This is the part of the script usually reserved for effects that do something interesting. This game's items do fuck all, so I'll just move on instead. The effects are pretty easily intelligible, that is to say, they're easy to spot. I never really ran into any problems with actually finding the effects. The only item I'd say I've blatantly missed is this big head, but that's not because the item itself blends into the surrounding, it's just tucked in an alleyway that I didn't notice was enterable on first pass of the area. Plus, I mean, look at it. It's clearly not the game's fault. I'm just bad at looking at things. Aside from that, though, the items are really easy to spot. For example, the apple is placed in a spot where not much else is going on, in a room that is otherwise pretty crowded. The pillow is also placed on its own platform where nothing else exists. Stuff like this. The last thing to talk about gameplay-wise is events, which can be best described as notable stuff that happens. Sometimes. Quilt's events are actually some of the most passive events I've ever really encountered. You don't interact with stuff to trigger them. Hell, some of them barely even stand out, and it might even be controversial to call them notable. Stuff just kind of tends to change. Sometimes it's as simple as a sprite being different. For example, the balloons in the sandcastle area will sometimes look kind of weird and also play a different sound as they drift by. It's so minor and you might not even really notice it on third pass, but it's there. And it happens, which is cool. A similar example is found in the checkered tile path. On the first or second pass of the area, it seems fine, but sometimes entering this room, you'll see those same weird balloons just floating across the screen. Again, it's so minor, and unless you specifically remember them not being there, this is so easy to just pass off as normal. Not all environmental events are this subtle. My favorite example of this stuff just changes thing is this weird variant of the Grey Town that only happens when a certain condition is met, which is when the mood variable, a variable that is never taught nor relayed to the player that it exists, is high enough. Before I actually show it to you, I want to set your expectations right. Usually when entering the Grey Town, the music kind of fades in a bit because the first chord is played late in the audio file. This lines up pretty nicely with the bed animation. It feels cozy despite the desolate nature of the environment you're sent to. Now, Imagine, after playing this game for some long amount of time, you go to bed and enter the bed cycle. Maybe you're trying to find like a specific route, or you just are having fun, I guess. And then... right? It almost functions like a jump scare. The music for this version of the Grey Town doesn't have that weird lead-in, so it can very easily catch you off guard. I like to interpret this event as being representative of hyperactivity, with the weird color scheme and the dudes running at Mach speed. I just feel a sense of energy you only get after eating chocolate and forgetting to take your medication. It's awesome, I feel so seen. Of course, not every event functions like this. There's a very notable cutscene-based event where you get into a rocket ship and fly off into space, but events like this can already be found in other fan games. Even the original Yume Nikki had an event where you literally crash land on Mars. Events like this one are kind of special to me. The dream world feels so much more dynamic. Like the dream world itself is changing depending on how the character feels at any particular moment. It's not like a bad memory being recollected, instead it's the character's emotional state being baked into the dreams themselves. Quilt's events are pretty common. There aren't that many, but considering the game's actual size, there's bound to be something just around the corner in most situations. I would compare the event density to a game like Yume Graffiti, but it really depends on what you consider an event. I'm including the balloons looking weird, but if you didn't, alongside some other less notable events, it becomes a lot closer to standard Yume Nikki density. I'm counting them though. The little things to me are part of what makes this fan game as special as it is. Now that the gameplay mechanics are out of the way, I feel the need to mention the bugs I found playing this game. Depending on the fan game, these could be game-breaking or so minute you might not even notice them. If a bug seems intentional, I won't mention it. Quilt is surprisingly buggy, in ways that I don't even know how to comprehend. First off, I have to bring up the incredibly bizarre game-breaking glitch I encountered once, and never again. When exploring one of the pink cloud areas, for some reason, the footstep graphic just changed into what looks like a missing texture that covered the entire screen, almost like a debug tile map or something. I have no idea what caused it. All I know is I encountered it once, restarted my save and retraced my steps while recording, and for some reason I was able to reproduce it. After which I saved my game with the glitch and started playing on a new save file, and it hasn't happened again. I notified one of the devs on Blue Sky, so hopefully this will be fixed in a future version, if there is one, but I'm gonna be real, this is an enigma. I don't even know how this can happen. I don't know how I did it, how I was able to reproduce it, and why it hasn't happened again. It's why. Moving on, while this game is incredibly consistent in most places, I found a very weird amount of oddities in the furniture room. Like, the water reflection of the sofa will clip into the door. The table under the trapdoor to the cubes area has some funky geometry for some reason, and there's a weird layering issue near the big bed. There's also this random spot where you can stand on the side of a cabinet, whatever this is. This area is just full of random inconsistencies. Not game ruining, still my favorite area in the game, but it is perplexing. Speaking of perplexing, in the checkered tile area, there are these lamps that usually glow. I think it's done with picture elements, but that's just a guess. However, at some point for me, they just stopped working, at least the ones in this specific screen. I have no idea why they stopped glowing, nor whether or not this was supposed to happen. I'm assuming it's not supposed to happen, which is why I'm bringing it up, but it could be intentional. It's really weird. That's all the bugs I wanted to bring up. The rest are either too unimportant, too uninteresting, and or have no real effect to the experience of the game. And that's all I have to say for this part of the video. While I wouldn't say Quilt's gameplay is the most engaging, it is really good at what it does. The lack of a nexus and the weird item system are incredibly unique and make this game worth playing just for the novelty of it. And the events being as passive as they are make for a very dynamic experience. There's a lot of potential in these concepts, and while I definitely wish some of them were explored further, I'm really happy that this game goes this far at all. In a sea of fan games with similar concepts shared between them, this game stands out by doing something a little bit different, and that's really cool. I don't know about you, but I love playing Yume Nikki Fangames for the artistic decisions made by the author. Of course, the gameplay plays a part in this, but the visuals and audio are a lot more important to me. It doesn't matter if the art is quote-unquote good or bad. What matters to me is whether or not the game's visuals and music align with the rest of the experience being presented. And Quilt is really good at its part! Starting out with the environments, since it's very important to understand the worlds the rest of the art is built around. Quilt's environments can probably best be described as kind of childish, like the rest of the game. They are nostalgically dreaming, which I surprisingly don't see too often in Yume Nikki Fangames, despite nostalgia being very prominent in liminal spaces. It's a very diverse mix of strange rooms, very, very large versions of regular spaces, and lots of sky imagery. There's a lot of fantastical elements to these worlds, which to me at least reads as childhood fantasy, like space travel and exploring the deep glowing sea. While this does mean that some worlds are pretty surface level, there are some very standout environments in this game that deserve a lot of love. Like the weird, almost glitchy looking grey world with colourful pyramids and strangely shaded trees. This was actually the first world I saw from this game when I saw Pareka's already streamed livestream on YouTube. There's also the two unforgettable 3D worlds this game has. Yes, 3D worlds in RPG Maker 2K3. The 3D hedge maze and this insane perspective planet thing. Nunu, you are a wizard. The hedge maze I can at least somewhat understand. It's probably done with pictures laid on top of each other. But I don't fucking know how they did this planet. This blows my goddamn mind. There's also the furniture maze, which I just love, so I'm gonna bring it up. I don't fucking get it either. I find Quilt's environments to be some of the least tense out of all of the fan games I've played. There's only really one spooky location. Maybe certain events may get a jump out of you, but they aren't scary, at least not to me. Even compared to a fan game like Answered Prayers, a game that literally had one of its scary locations removed in an update, has scarier locations than anything in Quilt. This game's dream world is about as calm as it gets when it comes to Yume Nikki Fangames, and while I wouldn't mind that changing, it's not exactly a problem. In other words, if you hate horror games, play this one. Play it. Go play this one. Play it! Quilt's dream worlds, to me at least, perfectly encapsulate the character being played. A cute little kid who's dreaming away the days, so I can't help but notice how empty this game seems to feel. There are NPCs in a few places, but a lot of this game's dream world is empty walkways with the odd balloon drifting by. Makes me question whether or not this protagonist is actually having that healthier childhood. There are no human figures in this game to be found, which is incredibly odd for numerous reasons. Maybe they didn't grow up with that many friends and had to settle dreaming up little creatures instead. Where are the parents? Alright, moving on. Art isn't my primary hyperfixation, but I feel well versed enough to talk about it. And I've been waiting for this part for reasons that should be obvious. This game's artistic style is so special to me. It's a limited mix of very bold photo bashing and textural elements that make neurodivergent folks like me go insane. And it's done so seamlessly, it kinda makes me question whether or not I'm actually good at it, and also kinda makes me forget that this game is a collaboration between multiple people. I bet you forgot about that as well. There's me reminding you. The art in Quilt has a sense of realism to it. You could almost picture it in reality. However, there's also something else going on with this game's art that makes it unique compared to other fan games. See, this textural thing isn't unique to Quilt. Just for example, Yume does a similar thing, but in that game, all the lighting and saturation almost always makes sense. It's a dream, but it's drawn out mostly with realism in mind. Even in Yume most absurd locations, logic is still vaguely considered. That's of course ignoring the deviations that Yume has in its own art, but I'll talk about that when I talk about Yume. I'll get to you! In Quilt, some of this pure realism is replaced with a bit of surrealism, with the most absurd colors and arrangements possible. Almost as if brightness and saturation are merely suggestions to what looks right. The surrealism is baked into the art style itself, and I love it. Quilt also dabbles itself in a little bit of glitch art, although only really prominently on one screen. This is basically the only area in the game where the art is non-continuous. Almost all the art in the game feels so seamless and consistent, and anytime that it breaks that smoothness, it's clearly done with intent, and I can't help but appreciate that. Yume Nikki Fangames will often subtly or wildly change the art style depending on a couple factors, but the one I'm most interested in is environmental stylistic discrepancies. You know, like one world looks like this and the other looks like this because it's that world. And Quilt doesn't actually have much of that. Outside of the previously mentioned screen with glitch art and a few other exceptions, this game's environmental art style is shockingly consistent for a four-way collaboration. I almost want to say it's disappointing that there's no shocking outliers in Quilt, but I'm not complaining. I love the art style this game has too much to give a shit. Most of the artistic variation actually comes in the little things, like the odd sprite here or there will have a clash against the environment, or maybe the floor will just be a flat color for a little bit. Biggest example I can think of is the purple planet, which is covered in a lot of stuff drawn in a very cartoonish, doodly art style. A lot of this game's outlier art comes in the form of sprites or one-off creatures, like the two weirdos in the blue-teal rooms. I actually don't know how to feel about this. I don't mind it, but I feel like in some cases these things could have been more surreal than cartoony. In the context of the game itself and what I assume the game is going for, it works, but it doesn't hit the same as, say, the big spider from Yume Graffiti that can so easily catch you off guard just because it looks so fucking weird. Yume Graffiti is really great at this kind of thing. I can't wait to talk about it. It wouldn't be a distance video without some music discussion, and with my multiple years of dream music creation behind me, I'm very excited for this part. Quilt's soundtrack is pretty damn interesting. It's a very weird mix of bizarrely uneasy melodies, the most strangely atmospheric ambience I've ever heard, and a lot of weird. There's a lot of weird in this soundtrack. Quilt's soundtrack is pretty strange. A lot of the tracks feel kind of random in a literal sense. I actually think procedural is the right word here. It's not every track, it's mostly the ones made by Fumin, but that actually seems to count for the majority of the tracks in the game, so you know, basically it's everywhere. Like the art, this game's soundtrack holds a strangely textural quality to it. If you're wondering how music can be textured, I sure hope you have the answer, because I still don't fucking know, just listen to it. You can kinda hear it, right? It's faint, but I can't help but feel like it's always there. Maybe I'm just neurodivergent and reading words in the wind, but I can't help but feel like there's something to this transcendental musical texture. If I figure it out, you bet I'm gonna make a full video on the concept. The more ambient parts of Quilt's soundtrack are also somewhat interesting. Where most playing games would have a simple drone or repetitive chord, Quilt's ambient tracks are a lot more dynamic. They seem to feel alive. They breathe in and out with extra textural noise added over top. The atmosphere created by the ambient tracks in this game can range from cold and windy to warm and lively and safe. Quilt's soundtrack handles dreambience in a couple interesting ways. For one, that proceduralness found in some of the Fumin tracks makes the listening experience a lot more chaotic compared to the other fan games I've played. I'd almost say it was jarring when I first heard the glitchy grey areas music. Didn't even feel that dreambient because it was so random. But as I kept listening, it eventually just became ambient for the same reasons that the teleport maze from Yume Nikki became ambient. The chaotic tracks in Quilt don't repeat to the same degree as the teleport maze, but the chaoticness is continuous to the same degree, so it becomes ambient in the same way. I especially love how this is handled in the bathrooms. The music is continuously chaotic, so you still sink further into it as you listen, but on top of this, there are extra sounds being played that blend into the music, making it even more random than it already is. It's ridiculous, and I love it so much. For two, the soundtrack also incorporates the dreambience classic of silence. Lots of very empty arrangements all over the place in this game. I think my favorite example of this is in the furniture room, where every element of the music is done by playing sound effects. This means that this area's music is not only random, but it also makes this area one of the most isolated feeling areas in all of Yume Nikki Fangame history to me. This game just conveys emptiness so well. It's kind of wild and also very awesome. It's also all over this game's soundtrack, which is concerning because this kind of emptiness to me conveys a feeling of isolation, which, again, where are your parents? For three, another dreambience classic that Quilt's soundtrack often tends to use is emulating or using sounds that would be found in the locations that the music represents. Like a dream version of a field recording. A very good example of this is the Toy Blocks maze. The music that plays here seems to emulate the rhythmic characteristics of toy blocks clacking together. The weird polyrhythmic chord stuff happening here is so weird, but it perfectly fits the world it's used in. This song is the sound this area would make if it fell apart. Another great example of this kind of thing is the music found in the bathrooms. Not only are there sound effects being played alongside the music to further immerse you into the bathrooms, the actual music itself sounds like a sample of a bottle half filled with water being tapped, or like water droplets landing in a metal bowl half filled with water. It's such a specific sound to replicate, but it fits. It is the sound that this room would make in your dreams. It's really good. Now here's another interesting thing about this game's dreamians. The usual signs of a lively dream aren't really found, outside of the event where the grey town becomes really weird. There's not much rhythm in this soundtrack, and where rhythm is found, it's usually really lopsided, or slanted just a little bit, or intentionally warped like in the city area. I feel like this protagonist is almost not allowed to have friends, or maybe their parents are somehow afraid that their child is going to become friends with someone abhorrent, so they just don't let them have friends. Or maybe they're just avoidant of people instinctually. I know I was when I was a kid. Perhaps this character is just autistic. I am now going to headcanon this character as autistic. I find that the music in almost every situation matches the environment and artworks being shown almost perfectly. There's no outliers, which is kind of disappointing, but not exactly unexpected. It means that everything is about as immersive as it can be in most cases, but that also means that I don't have much else to talk about. This game's dedication to depict the dreams of a child make it one of the most memorable fan games to me. It performs well in pretty much all artistic aspects. Such a seamless artistic experience for a game that is supposedly a collaboration, while also casually showing off the most insanely technical shit in two completely unrelated areas. The art style isn't that dynamic, all things considered, but it's textural to the point of being transcendentally neurodivergent, and the music fits the game's atmosphere so well it's almost like it would actually play in these environments if you were there. Just good stuff all around. This is the part of the video where I start talking about endings. If you want to avoid spoilers, the YouTube chapters feature should be helpful. If this doesn't work, there is a timestamp in the description. Yume Nikki Fangame will sometimes include some kind of ending or final cutscene, which can either provide clarity in the form of an answer to a begging question, or remove clarity in the form of giving you more questions. Usually an ending is achieved by collecting all the effects in the game, but this isn't always a guarantee. This fangame does not have an ending. Well, okay then. Quilt's lack of an ending isn't that surprising. It's a tiny game and doesn't hold that much obvious story or plot. Plus, implementing an ending in a game like Quilt is probably weird. The usual collect all effects isn't really possible, so there'd have to be some other kind of motive. The lack of an ending does make Quilt a bit directionless, but this isn't a problem for me. If anything, I actually kind of like that it has no ending. It complements the very anti-directional design of the rest of the game, if that makes sense. No ending, nothing to talk about, that's all that was in my head. Quilt is an incredible Yume Nikki Fangame in my opinion, hindered only by its small size. It's a technical, visual, and auditory marvel while working in peculiar ways. I recommend everyone ever play it at least once. It's small enough to experience most of it in the span of an hour, and it doesn't have anything too spooky in it. If you play Yume Nikki Fangame specifically for that spook, this might be a bit of a slog, but I'd still suggest playing it just to experience the item system and bizarre events. Incredible and technical, a little bit of a spectacle, but nothing scary ever gets in the reticle out of 10. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching my review of this fangame. Hey, just want to hop in at the end of the video to say I'm sorry for taking so long. Future reviews shouldn't take multiple months to create, at least I hope not. I've taken multiple breaks while making this video, and while I definitely wish I could talk about Yume Nikki Fangames endlessly without burning out, that's not possible. In other words, don't expect this channel to get an upload schedule, both because I'm incapable of following them and might burn out if I tried, but also because I refuse to turn this channel into a workshop for other creators. It's my channel, I make what I want on it when I want to. I'm not gonna end up like Veritasium being like, well actually, being more corporate is a great thing. No, Derek, being more corporate is not a good thing. Please? Well, you're not gonna fucking listen to me, what's the point? There's a chance that the structure of R&R videos changes after this one, just a little bit, but after a couple videos, the structure should solidify. Considering this is only version 0.01a, I might get around to reviewing this game again after a couple updates. By that point, the structure is likely to be 100% solid. Anyway, that's all I wanted to add. Hope you all like this style of video, I can't wait to make more of these. As always, I've left some of the secrets and events out of this video so you can still find something yourself. If you've played this fan game, let me know what you thought of it, especially if your opinion differs. I don't like echo chambers. I prefer seeing a different perspective. If you like what I had to say and want to see more, feel free to like and subscribe. What are you really subscribing for?